On this channel there has been a lot of discussion about the cosmic elements of Elden Ring, those higher beings and concepts of the story, like the mysterious outer gods, Ranni's dark moon, the primeval current, and even the Elden Ring itself. Yet there is one mysterious facet of the story that I have not tackled in its own video, a darker part of Elden Ring's story haunting in its blood-soaked presentation, the Blood Star. In the eternal darkness lurks a power, an eldritch being which communicates through blood and torment. What makes its sinister nature more interesting is the way in which it has been readily incorporated into certain institutions of the Lands Between, with many unaware of its true symbolism and meaning. There are further hints that this entity's influence spreads to the world outside the Lands Between, manipulating humanity into conflict, as if to spread their influence more. Even more interesting is that its need for spilled blood means that it crosses over with another cosmic being, the outer god known as the Formless Mother, leading many to speculate on their potential connections. This video also comes out at an interesting time following the gameplay trailer for Shadow of the Erdtree, as one of these central figures, Messmer, may well have a connection to the Blood Star or the Formless Mother. So join me this week as we unpack the mysteries of the Blood Star, its nature, its adherence, and its potential relationship with the Mother of Truth. And remember guys that if you like Elden Ring lore, then consider subscribing to the channel and liking this video. However, before we offer our sacrifice to the Blood Star, it is time for a word from today's sponsor, Hellofresh. Hellofresh is a product I use myself frequently, because it makes having a healthier diet so much more convenient. As someone who spends a lot of his time sitting down working in front of a PC, it's a comfort to know that my dinner will be quick and fast without having to resort to a takeaway. HelloFresh's recipes come pre-portioned and delivered to my door, taking the stress out of healthy eating. HelloFresh has more options than ever to support your wellness and fitness journey. With their biggest menu ever of 45 plus dinner options. Start your New Year resolutions off on the right foot with options for calorie and protein smart recipes to support your gym and fitness regimes. HelloFresh is kicking off 2024 by focusing on breakfast. Get your day off to the right start, as HelloFresh are now offering subscribers one free breakfast item per box for life while your subscription is active. So click the link in the description below or use my code SMOLFREE and get free breakfast for life, one breakfast item per box while the subscription is active. Thanks again to HelloFresh for sponsoring this video, and now back to the lore. This is a vague subject with little in-game sources, and so I think it's useful to start this discussion with what we do know. There are two spells that mention the Blood Star by name, the Briars of Sin and Briars of Punishment, though both are repeats of one another. For that reason, I will read the full description of Briars of Sin, which read the following. An aberrant sorcery discovered by exiled criminals. Theirs are the sorceries most reviled by the Academy. Wounds the caster with thorns of sin, creating a spiral of blood thorns. The guilty, their eyes gouged by thorns, lived in eternal darkness. There, they discovered the Blood Star. There's actually a lot of information revealed here in a single item. The fact that this was discovered by criminals, that the Blood Star seems to be able to communicate with those who are lacking sight, and that it is reviled by the Academy of Rea Lucaria. And we will examine all of those points in detail throughout this video. However, for now I want to focus on the fundamental core of this entity, the fact that it is a star, because we know far more about stars and the lore surrounding them than we do about the Blood Star itself, and so looking at stars in general, we can get a foundation from which to work from. Of course, the fact that it is named a star alone isn't enough to confirm that it is actually the same as others, given this could just be a name that is given to it by humans who don't fully understand its nature. We know that stars in the world of Elden Ring are living beings, unlike the ones of the real world. Firstly, we know that Glintstone contains the vitality of the stars, something told to us by Selene. And we of course also face a star ourselves, Estelle, a fearsome cosmic creature that is referred to as a malformed star. But Glintstone is the more important aspect for the discussion for now, as Glintstone is the medium through which sorcerers in the lands between are able to summon the power of the stars, and is the foundation of glintstone sorcery. Thus, if the blood star is truly a regular star, it must also have a relationship with glintstone, and it does. And we find this out thanks to the robes of Alberich, the rogue sorcerer. Again, we will return to this interesting fellow later, but just for the moment we are interested in the red glintstone embedded in his robes. The item description for Alberich's hat reads the following: Mad Tongue Alberich's pointed hat, a sign of a heretical practitioner, set with red glintstone, said to be formed by the blood of sacrifices, strengthens thorn sorcery. Alberich was an aloof yet disturbed heretical sorcerer, said to have been driven mad by jeering tongues during his service to the Round Table Hold long ago. So the stones on his cloak are red glintstones, ones created by sacrifice, but glintstones nonetheless, and ones that are connected to the blood star specifically, as we can see that these empower thorn sorceries, the sorceries of the blood star, thus connecting this form of glintstone to the blood star. This very much reinforces the idea that the blood star is indeed a star, or at least a cosmic entity like stars, that can be communed with through the same medium as the others, albeit with a certain sinister, bloody twist. So what do we know about glintstone and the stars that can help us understand the blood star? Well, I like to start this discussion around stars by visiting the experts on the matter. This is Selin and the primeval sorcerers. Glintstone is the main medium used by all sorcerers in the lands between. It is a material that allows a sorcerer to access and connect to the power of the stars, to manipulate it as spells. But how? How is this mineral able to connect to the stars whilst the user is of course spatially disconnected from the actual location of stars? Well, like I say, let's listen to one of the experts, Selin, and allow her to explain the nature of glintstone.
Our art draws upon the powers embedded in glintstone. But what is the nature of such power? Glintstone is the amber of the cosmos. Golden amber contains the remnants of ancient life and houses its vitality, while glintstone contains residual life, and thus the vitality of the stars. It should not be forgotten that glintstone sorcery is the study of the stars and the life therein.
Selin explains glintstone by comparing it to amber, describing the process of how amber can harden and trap life within it, seen of course in Jurassic Park, or even in the amber that comes from the Erdtree, as we see in the description of the amber medallions. Glintstone is essentially the amber of the cosmic realm then. It's a mineral that has trapped the vitality and residual life stuff of the stars. It therefore makes sense that this mineral can be manipulated by sorcerers in order to project the power of the stars, even if the stars are very far away, with each glintstone containing an element of the stars themselves within it. However, the fact that it can be used to project power, to be used as offensive spells, is the only aspect that most sorcerers care about, the basic utility of it. It's the foundation of modern sorcery, so much so it's so central to Rhea Lucaria that they essentially have mines opened for digging this stuff up. However, there are those that realise there is a deeper significance to the glintstone, and of course, this is the aforementioned primeval sorcerers. This is why Selin denounces the carrion-led efforts of the Academy as toothless pedantry. Sorcery for sorcery's sake is toothless, not utilising the full potential of glintstone sorcery. Selin tells us that glintstone can be used to connect to the so-called primeval current via her dialogue on why she was expelled from Rhea Lucaria.
If you recall, I was exiled from the Academy of Rhea Lucaria. It was for attempting to restore the primeval current of glintstone sorcery. The toothless pedantry peddled by the Carian royal family can rot for all I care. I want glintstone sorceries that open our minds, unbound by terrestrial taboos, no matter what we give in return.
The implication here is that while glintstone can be used for the mundane purpose of summoning celestial projectiles, it can also connect the mind to the realm beyond the terrestrial, to the cosmos and the stars themselves. So what is this primeval current? In my prior primeval current video from almost 2 years ago, I made a vague guess that the primeval current of glintstone sorcery was a force that allowed one to connect to the cosmos, a unseen force that connected to the place where the stars themselves are located, despite the obvious spatial difficulties. And while I believe the effect of studying Glintstone does indeed provide this ability, the ability to connect to the cosmos directly and open your mind to it, my opinion has changed on the meaning of Primeval Current. In fact, my interpretation of the word Primeval Current is far more simple now. The Primeval Current is just another term for the cosmos, for space. Firstly, let's consider the name itself, Primeval. Well, this of course makes sense, as space is always the background for every creation story. And yes, the abyss of space is often analogized to water, and thus we get the name Primeval Current. With this understanding in place, if we replace the term Primeval Current with the word abyss or space in the description of any of the relevant spells, then it begins to make sense. For example, let's read Comet Azure but swap out Primeval Current for the word the cosmos, so it would read the following. Legendary sorcery devised by Azure, Primeval Sorcerer. When Azure glimpsed into the cosmos, he saw darkness. He was left both bewitched and fearful of the abyss. In short, the school of Primeval Current sorcerers are essentially those who want to use Glintstone to actually access the Primeval Current, access space, where the stars come from, rather than just summon their power here in the terrestrial. They want to open their mind to the world of the stars, and ultimately become one. And as such, their minds being constantly open to the Primeval Current and in contact with it, begins to transform them into Glintstone itself. And this is something we learn of via Asur and Lusat's headpieces. Lusat's headpiece reads the following. The giant blue Glintstone crown worn by Lusat, Primeval Current Sorcerer. This crown replaced Lusat's brain and skull altogether, and now, removed from his body, it is all but dead. Through a process of almost osmosis, because he's had his brain opened to the Primeval Current and space so regularly, the stars have begun to transfer into his brain, replacing his organic material with Glintstone. So let's summarise. Glintstone contains the life stuff of the stars, like amber containing life within it. This amber can be utilised to summon the power of the stars, but it can also be used to commune with the place of the stars themselves. Prolonged exposure with these stars will also transfer that vitality into one's organic matter, turning your body into Glintstone, as is the case with Lusat and Azure, who've had their brains and minds open to the Primeval Current for too long. This is a baseline star relationship that we should now try and apply to the Blood Star to see if it matches the criteria of what a star is. Zuli the Witch did a really excellent video recently on Alberich the Mad Tongue, and by removing his hat, she showed that underneath, Alberich seems to be suffering a fate similar to Lusat and Azure, that his brain is being replaced slowly with Glintstone, except Red Glintstone. This means that no matter the differences between regular stars and the Blood Star, and all its little quirks regarding blood sacrifice and blindness, we now know that in some respects, the Blood Star does behave the same as any other star. If Glintstone contains the vitality of the stars, then what does that mean for the Blood Star and Red Glintstone? We already know from Alberich's set that Red Glintstone seems to be made from blood sacrifice, but how specifically? Well, the staffs of those who wield thorn sorceries may hold the clue. In Zuli's Alberich video, they pointed out the fact there is a sacrifice embedded in the staff of both the Guilty and of Alberich. It looks like a small animal that's been sacrificed. To get further insight into the relevance of this, let's read the description of the staff of the Guilty. A heretical staff fashioned from a smouldering, withered sapling that turns the blood of sacrifices pierced by it into Glintstone. So this confirms the process by which Red Glintstone is made. It isn't corrupted blue Glintstone. Red Glintstones are literally crystallized sacrificial blood. What does this mean for the nature of the Blood Star, if Glintstones are meant to relate to the stars that they connect to? Well, it reinforces what I've already said. While this star is a star in its most basic outline, it seems to be one that is not connected to the Primeval Current. It seems to exist in a different metaphysical plane that can be accessed by the blind, and it connects to the terrestrial realm through sacrificial blood, Not just regular blood, you can't just collect blood anywhere, it has to be sacrificial blood. And this is because the Blood Star isn't like the other celestial bodies that are cold, distant and alien. This entity demands sacrifice, it wants it. It wants blood that is taken from sacrifices specifically in its honour. With that idea in our mind, let us read the second passage of the Staff of the Guilty, which says, "Sorceries are scaled with faith, rather than intelligence when wielding this staff, which enhances thorn sorceries in particular." Faith. Faith is the critical component, not intelligence, for thorn sorceries, the magic of the Blood Star. This tells you a lot about this entity and how it's separate from the other stars, and I think it's a point best illustrated by Ranni's ending. When Ranni institutes her Age of Stars, she talks about it being cold and distant, and by looking at the translations it becomes clearer that what Ranni means here is that this will be a logical order, an order that's disconnected from the world physically and emotionally. There won't be decisions made on dogma or faith. The decisions and the shape of the order will be dictated by a cold outside celestial body, the Dark Moon. And this is generally where the celestial bodies sit in the spectrum of faith versus intelligence. Intelligence is that cold, intellectual objectivity. Faith is that closer, more personal dogma and belief system. And yet the Blood Star, something we have defined as a star in all its other behaviours, is acting more like a god. It demands faith. It demands sacrifice. It is bloody and religious in nature. It connects to this world not through glintstone which has fallen from the cosmos. No, it connects to the terrestrial realm through blood. Glintstone seems to have first appeared in the Lands Between via the cosmos itself, and this is something implied by the founding Reign of Stars, the founding glintstone sorcery that describes an event where an astrologer connected to the primeval current, and the star's amber fell upon the land, highly implied to be glintstone. Whereas, with the Blood Star, Red Glintstone is formed in this world by a belief system, by sacrificing something. So while the Blood Star is clearly a star in its certain behaviours, it is something very much different. It is not cold and distant, it wants, it desires, it craves to be worshipped by the mortals of the Lands Between. And it is intimately connected to blood. It is connected to our world through channels of blood, not by the cosmos. This star is a different, malevolent entity, far different from its cold kin. As to how it reaches out to people that are blind and appears to them in their darkness, I can only guess. It must be the same way that first astrologer first connected with the primeval current, as described in the founding Reign of Stars. That astrologer did not have glintstone, and yet he was still able to connect to the primeval current. The cosmic beings in Elden Ring are able to connect with humanity and the terrestrial realm, it's just there are tools that make it easier, like glintstone or red glintstone. Two things appear to be required to use the power of the Blood Star and connect with it: a loss of sight and a blood sacrifice. This holds true in both the case of the Thorn Sorcerers and Alberich, the only practitioners of this magic that we know of. The guilty are of course blinded, literally, and the pain and blood that comes with such an act plays the role of a blood sacrifice. The blood sacrifice and blindness that allowed them to first connect with the Blood Star. However, you notice that when they additionally use Thorn Sorceries now, they still need to offer that blood sacrifice, because every time someone uses one of these spells they cut themselves. Alberich's case is fascinating as well, and is one of those really great examples of FromSoft's attention to detail. The guilty, the Thorn Sorcerers, are a baseline. They tell us what you need to use the power. You need to have your sight occluded, and you need to offer blood. Alberich is not blind, however. Instead, he has artificially recreated these conditions without permanently blinding himself. You can see that he covers his eyes with a black cloth, occluding his sight, but not blinding himself. Additionally, he has covered himself in red glintstone, acting as the blood sacrifice that would have initially happened were he blinded. How Alberich was able to uncover this workaround is something we will talk about soon, when we talk about the potential connections to the cult figure known as the Snowy Crone. The Blood Star is found in the darkness, suggesting it plays by a different set of rules than regular stars that can be connected to via the primeval current. Perhaps it exists in a different metaphysical plane than regular stars, given that it can be found and communed with by people that are blind. They commune with it in the abyss of blindness rather than the literal abyss of space. The description of the guilty seeing the Blood Star in the darkness of blindness sounds very similar to Azur's experience of peering into the primeval current. Again, I'll read Comet Azur. When Azur glimpsed into the primeval current, he saw darkness. He was left both bewitched and fearful of the abyss. When compared side by side with the Briars of Sin, these item descriptions do appear to be different types of the same sort of communion, which makes the Blood Star unique, as this was not achieved by Glintstone and opening your mind to the primeval current. In fact, the Blood Star was not discovered by sorcerers at all. If we look back at the Briar of Sin's description, it says that the Blood Star and these spells were discovered by exiled criminals. The fact this is not a star that was discovered by regular sorcerers using Glintstone again suggests to me that the Blood Star, whilst a star, maybe exists in a slightly different plane of existence, and is certainly unique in the way that it behaves. We can almost see the presence of the Blood Star radiating from the void in which the blind can see, as when the Thorn sorcerers use their power, the sockets of their blind eyes glow red. Now that we've sort of hit a dead end on the Star Avenue, I would now like to move on to the followers of the Blood Star and see what they can tell us about this enigmatic being. Let's look at the Guilty and Alberich. We of course couldn't discuss the Blood Star without reviewing the most prominent practitioners of its magic, the Guilty, the Thorn sorcerers. We have already read the associated spells, Briars of Sin and Punishment, and we know that these people are exiled criminals known as the Guilty, bound with thorns and blinded by them in a very cruel punishment. We know that in general thorns are used as a punishment in the lands between. For example, there's the garb called the Guilty Hood, covered in thorns, and it reads the following. Coarse hooded cloak of olive brown, the garb of those accused of lesser crimes, indicated by the collar of sharpened branches. Bear in mind these thorn collars are only for minor crimes. Pretty brutal. And so the blinding that is inflicted upon the Thorn sorcerers, these Guilty, must be for far more serious crimes. I think it's also a fair assumption that this is a sentence that is being given down by the Erdtree Authority, by the Golden Order. Firstly, because they are the ruling force currently. They are the authority over these lands, so it's obviously them that are administering law and order. Indeed, we see people throughout Limgrave who are wearing this Guilty garb, crucified on what appears to be Marika's rune, mimicking Marika's iconic sacrificial pose, again implying that this is a sentence carried out by Golden Order authorities. Finally, we have the Thorn sorcerers themselves, who are put to work by the Order of the Fire Monks, an order clearly created by Marika to contain the ruinous flame. Indeed, the lore about their appointment is confirmed in Surge o' Flame, which reads the following. The giant's flame is the flame of ruin, capable of burning the Erdtree, and so following the war against the giants, its ruinous blaze was sealed, and guardians were appointed to watch over it. It makes sense that following the war of the giants, Marika would create an order to watch over the Flame of Ruin. At the war's end, she clearly realised that the Flame of Ruin could not be destroyed or extinguished, so instead it must be contained alongside the last of the fire giants. Of course, nowhere is it stated directly that Marika created this order, just that they were created following the battle with the giants, but by implication it is of course Marika and her new order that created this to contain the fire. Who else would benefit from such an act? And indeed we do get further confirmation when we find two-finger symbols found in banners throughout the Fire Monk base at Giant Conquering Hero's Grave. So, if this is an order established by the Erdtree regime, it must be Marika's regime who is punishing these Guilty and sending them to the mountaintop as their exile. Does this mean that Marika and the Golden Order are well aware of what the punishment does? That by blinding people, criminals, in this way, they are forcing an encounter with the Blood Star? I think so, because in this way they are creating a useful tool to be sent to one of the most dangerous fronts in the Erdtree society. They are transforming a dissenter, a difficult person of society, into something that can be used, yet also used far away from home. Indeed, the Blood Star and its thorn sorceries are so central to the Fire Monk Order that even the prelates have incorporated it as part of their equipment, via the whips that they wield, which read the following: Hefty whip, covered in crimson thorns. Weapon of the prelates who lead the Fire Monks. A device of fearsome religious encouragement. It is fashioned in the image of the Briars of Sin. The other weapon wielded by prelates is the Infernal Crozier, a hammer moulded after fire, clearly the Flame of Ruin. I therefore wonder if the image on the chest of some of the prelates is a combination of these two things, the thorns of the Blood Star and the fire of the Flame of Ruin, meaning this is an order that worships both of these beings, especially since, to me at least, the long part of the image on the prelate's armour looks like the stakes that pierced the fire giants, which I believe are also related to the Blood Star, but we will discuss that shortly. The beliefs of the Fire Monk organisation are complex, a combination of different beliefs and ideals that have evolved over time. It was clearly established with the sole purpose of guarding the flame, yet in time they've become pseudo-religious, monks, and they begin to worship their charge despite its terrible power. Indeed, they even mimic the appearance of the fire giant himself, signifying the fact they are the new guardians of the flame. They dye their hair red, and they place the face of the fell god on their chest plates, looking like the fire giant himself. So it isn't too surprising that this mongrel theocracy would also incorporate the thorns of the Blood Star into their symbology. As I mentioned a moment ago, I believe that thorn magic was instrumental in defeating the fire giants in that climactic conflict. One of the things in Elden Ring that we have no direct answer for is the giant stakes that pierce the body of the giants. However, I've always maintained that these stakes are the work of thorn magic for a couple of reasons. Firstly, if you look closely at the stakes, you can see that thorns have started growing from them. Secondly, again, Occam's razor. The thorn sorcerers are very prominent in this area of the map, and perhaps they were chosen to be here for a reason, because there is prior knowledge of how useful thorn sorcery is against the fire giants. Finally, another potential clue is the fact we actually find these stakes, albeit smaller ones, in the fire monk camps found around Liurnia, again suggesting that these are tied to the thorn sorcerers, because these sorcerers are also present at the camps in Liurnia where these stakes are. They are the common factor in both locations. Of course, I could be wrong and these stakes could just be replicas, further symbols of order and authority, and the stakes that sprouted at the ground could be some unknown power of Marika when she was wielding the power of the Elden Ring. I think when you take all the circumstantial evidence together, the proximity of the thorn sorcerers to the dead giants, the thorn-like appearance of these giant spears, I think it's likely that thorn sorcery is the source of these great weapons that were wielded against the fire giants during the war. And if that is true, it would give new prominence to the Blood Star and its importance to the fire monks. No wonder they have it as part of their sigil and iconography, as the power of the Blood Star was employed to take down the fell god. With all that said, I want to talk about the spells themselves for a little bit, as I find them rather interesting. The first thing I would like to question is, why thorns? Why does this eldritch being of unknowable power and origin seem to manifest itself through such a mundane thing as thorns? Yes, they are relevant to the lands between who use them as a form of punishment, but why does the star manifest this power? Well, to me, it's because the thorns were likely one of the first elements that the Blood Star interacted with when it met its first humans. Let's revisit the description for Briars of Sin and look a little closer. It says an aberrant sorcery discovered by exiled criminals, and that they discovered the Blood Star. It was criminals who first discovered the Blood Star, almost by accident it seems, by having their eyes blinded in a punishment before people knew about the Blood Star, and then they had a chance encounter with it. So this celestial being first interacted with humans who'd had their eyes put out by thorns. It would therefore make sense that it would grant them a sorcery based on what it could see, blood and thorns, and thus we get the Briars of Sin and the Briars of Punishment. We've already discussed that the Blood Star behaves differently than other stars. It's more emotional, maybe more sinister than the cold celestial beings that are other stars. It's something that operates off faith, and must enjoy the punishment, must enjoy getting these blood sacrifices. And thus it's a warped irony that it would create these bloody thorns to be wielded by the Thorn Sorcerers. Now, with the Thorn Sorcerers discussed, I do want to discuss another player that is relevant to this story. One we have mentioned a few times in passing already, Alberich. We know that Alberich was a Tarnished and once a member of Round Table Hold, something we learn of via his set that tells us he was in service to Round Table Hold a long time ago. We've already discussed the reason Alberich will be heretical is because he practices Blood Star magics, which is heterodox to the way in which Glintstone sorcerers use Glintstone and regular magic. Perhaps this is why he was not welcomed at Round Table Hold, but for whatever reason he was driven mad by jeering tongues at Round Table Hold, people mocking and taunting him. He drops the Taunter's Tongue item, suggesting that this is indeed the tongue of someone at Round Table Hold who used to taunt him. Whose tongue could this be? Well, there is a member of Round Table Hold who doesn't speak. Incha of the Royal Remains, the henchman for Gideon Ofnir. Is the reason he doesn't speak because he's had his tongue taken out from him? Did he once used to mock Alberich when they were comrades at the Round Table Hold? Perhaps spurred on by his arrogant all-knowing master, who thought his research into the Blood Star was a load of nonsense. We don't know for certain. Incha could not speak for another reason, a vow perhaps, or because he thinks other people are beneath him. We don't know for certain, but it's an interesting thought, and shout out to David, my editor, who was actually the one who came up with this theory. But Alberich is very interesting for our study of the Blood Star, for he is the only sorcerer that we know that uses the spells of the Blood Star without being one of the blinded guilty. And in trying to unpack his lore, it might be worth our while looking at some of the other spells that he uses when he invades us. He uses cold sorceries. Specifically, he appears to use Glintstone Icecrag and Frozen Mist, and this has some very interesting implications. Both of these spells refer to Ranni's relationship with the Snowy Crone. For example, Glintstone Icecrag reads the following: sorcery said to have been used by the old Snow Witch. The Snowy Crone taught the young Ranni to fear the dark moon as she imparted her cold sorcery. This is obviously fascinating, as the Snowy Crone is someone we really only know as someone who mentored Ranni and taught her the deeper occult mysteries of her dark moon. Ranni's dark moon item description tells us that Ranni's moon is connected to the occult. It's clearly a darker force than Renala's full moon, for example. I have often speculated that it was Ranni's tutelage under the Snowy Crone and learning about the occult was how she conceptualized the Night of the Black Knives and the cult magic necessary to transpose the Rune of Death into the blades, and of course conduct the ritual that split the effects of the Rune of Death between her and Godwyn. So what is the relevance of Alberich knowing these spells as well? Did the Snowy Crone teach him as well? Well, we have to assume so. She is the source of these types of magic. Does this mean that she also taught him about the Blood Star, its secrets, and the Red Glintstone? Perhaps. After all, Alberich seems to be one of the only individuals who is not blind to have knowledge of its power. He is able to use the spells of the guilty without having suffered a terrible fate himself. So it makes sense to me that this mysterious crone, well versed in the occult and the dark side of celestial bodies, would have been the one to teach Alberich about the Blood Star. I have always assumed that the Snowy Crone is likely located on the mountaintop of the Giants, given she is the Snowy Crone. Perhaps she is a remnant of the old astrologer community that once lived alongside the Fire Giants. There is one cold sorcery that is not associated with the Snowy Crone, the Zamor Ice Storm, the description of which describes them as an ancient people with an old enmity with the Fire Giants. My speculation is that the Zamor are the original creators of these cold magics. It would therefore make sense that the Snowy Crone once lived on the mountaintop of the Giants, and later adapted the magic of the Zamor who also lived here. If that's the case, perhaps it is no surprise that she has knowledge of the Blood Star, given the corpses of the giants skewered by thorn magic found all throughout the mountaintops of the giants. Or perhaps, if she's old enough, she even witnessed the war herself. Otherwise, she has the thorn sorcerers in this area that she could observe and learn from. There is also another interesting observation about the mountaintop of the giants that was made by a viewer who commented on one of my community posts, Monsieur Dorgat, who suggested that there may be a connection to Alberich at Heretic's Rise, a possibility I had never considered, so massive shout out for Monsieur Dorgat for the following speculation. The connections being made here are A, the ideas that I just discussed, that Alberich, having learned cold sorceries, must have some connection to the mountaintop of the giants, and point B, they posit the interior of Heretical Rise is filled with Red Glintstone. This is really interesting, as Heretical Rise had always been of great interest to me. From a naming point of view, it once again uses the word heretical, which again would make us think that this is something to do with Rhea Lucaria and a banished type of sorcery. And indeed that assumption is correct, when you see that it has been sealed by Rhea Lucaria. There is a seal on the doorway that has the sigil of Rhea Lucaria, and there are marionettes that guard the tower, inside and out. Given the name, would it be a stretch to imagine that this Heretical Rise is tied to the heretic, Alberich in particular? However, the point of heresy that is sealed within here does seem to be a primeval current sorcery, as you are rewarded with the founding Rain of Stars from this tower, not a thorn sorcery. Does that mean that Alberich didn't also look into the primeval current? Of course not. This doesn't rule out him at all. He could well have tried to research the primeval current to better understand the nature of the Blood Star, or he just wanted to learn other heretical sorceries, though this is all just speculation. Finally, Monsieur Dorgat also mentions the possibility that this place is filled with Red Glintstone. And indeed, in the interior of Heretical Rise, there are clumps of dark stone that are in the shape of glintstone but a darker, possibly red or black colour. They aren't as bright as the glintstone found on Alberich's robes, but perhaps this is red glintstone in its pure form before it's cut, shaped and buffed. However, I do note that some of the glintstone on Alberich's robes are darker in colour, and closer to the appearance of these red clusters. For additional context on these rises, these towers, found throughout the lands between, it does appear that these towers are often places where heretical sorcerers go to practice in seclusion. Many of them provide you with memory stones, a pendant crafted from the Black Moon of the Nox. Heretical Rise provides you with founding Rain of Stars, a heretical primeval current sorcery. Alberic's Rise in the consecrated snowfield also seems deeply tied to primeval current study, as one can find graven masses all around the tower, and at the top you find another one dead, with the graven mass talisman as a reward. Nor is the potential red glintstone that's found in Heretical Rise unique to this rise. In fact, you can find more in Len's Rise found in Dragon Barrow, and interestingly, the red glintstone in Len's Rise is also found in the same room as a graven skull. And incidentally, the clusters found in Len's Rise are actually bigger and it's easier to see the red colouring than in Heretical Rise. But like Heretical Rise, Len's Rise seems to combine both the study of the primeval current and potentially the Blood Star, if this is indeed red glintstone. It therefore makes sense that the majority of these towers have been sealed by the authority of Rhea Lucaria. All that to say, yes, this Heretical Rise could well be associated with Alberich, but it could also be linked to another heretic. But I think looking at the other towers does give us important context as to the nature of these towers and what was studied within it. I don't know, what do you guys think? It is certainly a compelling narrative, and I leave it to you to decide. However, even if Heretical Rise isn't linked to Alberich, I do believe he spent some time up here, as is evidenced by the cold sorceries that he uses. But now Alberich is merely an invader in our game. He invades in the Round Table Hold. But why? Perhaps he just seeks more blood for the Blood Star. Indeed, he wields a scythe, a great bloodletting weapon. Or perhaps he just wants revenge against the Round Table. After all, that is where he invades, right? Breaking the no-conflict rules of this sacred place. And it's probably a bit of both. Ultimately, that is what we know about the Blood Star and how it interacts with its adherents, The Erdtree regime has no problem in utilising its power. It even forms part of their justice system. If there's difficult members of society, dangerous criminals, they will set them up to be blinded and meet with the Bloodstar, becoming a useful thorn sorcerer who will serve forever under the Fire Monks, removed far away from the people of Leyndell and repurposed to serve them. However, to Rhea Lucaria, its perversion of the normal relationship between Glintstone and Star, and sorcerer and magic, is enough for them to deem it heretical and ban it throughout their lands. With that said, and an understanding of the Bloodstar, the way it interacts with its followers, we need to talk about the elephant in the room, the Formless Mother. We have already discussed how integral blood is to the Bloodstar, that this is the primary medium through which one communicates with this celestial being, and this is where it starts to overlap with the Formless Mother, who seems to interact with the lands between in the same way, through blood. We've already thoroughly examined how the Bloodstar uses blood in consort with lack of sight, so now it's time to compare it to the Formless Mother, and see if there are any differences or similarities between the two. What we know about the Formless Mother is also quite vague, but it boils down to a few main points. First of all, she is named as one of the Outer Gods. Secondly, her chosen medium of communication is clearly blood. For example, we hear the story of Mohg, who first communed with her in the depths of the Shunning Ground through his corrupted blood, as Bloodboon reads the following. Sacred incantation of Mohg, Lord of Blood. Thrust arm into the body of the Formless Mother, then scatter the blood flame to set the area ablaze. The Mother of Truth craves wounds. When Mohg stood before her deep underground, his accursed blood erupted with fire, and he was besotted with the defilement that he was born into. Mohg's blood erupted with fire, suggesting the cosmic entity was able to manipulate his blood in order to communicate with him. The description also states that the Mother of Truth craves wounds, and this is perfectly logical if it influences the physical world through blood. More wounds means more blood, which means more influence. However, here I already see one of the main differences. The Mother of Truth needs blood. This is true, she needs blood to be spread, and this is why she craves wounds. The more blood is spread, whether it be hers or others, her influence is spread in the lands between. However, this isn't quite the same for the Bloodstar. Yes, it requires blood as a medium, but not just blood being spread for the sake of it. It needs sacrifices. It needs there to be a pain and almost religious element to the way that blood is spilled. Additionally, the Formless Mother communicated with Mohg through his blood within his body, whereas the Bloodstar also needed people to be blind in order to appear before them. This does not really seem to be the case with Mohg. Yes, one of his omen horns has pierced his eyes, but it's not exactly the same as him having it inflicted upon him by an external force, and both of his eyes being removed at the same time. The Bloodstar seems to manifest in a more secretive way as well, within the darkness of those who are blind or have their sight occluded, whereas the corruption of the Formless Mother is plain to see, where blood has been spilled and her corruption has taken hold. We see this in Rose Church in Liurnia, as well as Mohgwyn Palace, which of course have the blood swamps. The Formless Mother just needs blood spread everywhere, and as such it makes sense that Mohg's knights, the Bloody Fingers, are invading fiends who seek to shed further blood, usually for their own bloodlust initially, but ultimately if blood is spilled, then the Formless Mother's plans are advanced. Now, I bring up the Bloody Fingers for a reason, because there is one member that is of interest for our investigation into the Bloodstar, and that is Okina, because of the land he comes from, the land of reeds, and its potential connection to the Bloodstars. Okina is one of the most dangerous Bloody Fingers. The description of his weapon, the Rivers of Blood, tell us all we need to know of this guy. It reads, Weapon of Okina, swordsman from the land of reeds, a cursed weapon that has felled countless men. When Mohg, the Lord of Blood, first felt Okina's sword and madness upon his flesh, he had a proposal, to offer Okina the life of a demon, whose thirst would never go unsated. Okina had one goal in life, to become the master of the blade and slaughter as many people as possible. He is a murderer and someone overcome by his bloodlust. So much so that when he came to the lands between, he takes a pop at Mohg himself, one of the demigods. Instead of killing Okina for this trespass, Mohg saw Okina's capacity for violence as something to elevate into his dynasty, and thus granted him a bloody finger, so that Okina could invade any world he chose to wreak havoc and spill blood. A win-win for both parties. What is relevant here, however, is the country from which Okina hails, the Land of Reeds. Based on the samurai attire from this region, it's clearly this world's version of Japan. Okina may be a man of violence, but the more we look at the Land of Reeds, the more it becomes clear that he is a product of his environment. For example, the lore surrounding his disciples, the Inaba, speaks of a warrior culture that values martial prowess above all else, as the White Reed set reads, "Armour of the White Reeds, fashioned from banded iron plates, worn by the Inaba, head disciples of the great swordsman Okina." The Inaba travelled in pursuit of not only the master who abandoned them, but also proper deaths, won honourably through hard-fought combat. To be a White Reed is to seek death, fitting for the Inaba, who have desired nothing more than to die by the sword. So yeah, it's a martial, warlike country, but that's one thing. But we learn more about the Land of Reeds and its current state via the regular Land of Reeds set, which reads the following. The Land of Reeds has long been locked in a miserable civil war, during which time it has remained alienated from the cultures of its neighbours. Little wonder that the entire nation has succumbed to the blood-soaked madness, or so it is said. So this region is undergoing a brutal civil war, and it's hard not to see this as a reference to the Sengoku era, a period of Japanese civil war that lasted for hundreds of years, and of course was the backdrop for the game Sekiro, so From Software have referenced this conflict before. However, I think this is more than just a regular civil war. As I said back in my Elden Ring class video from almost 2 years ago, the language used here is very interesting, and it makes me think there's something more sinister going on. The term blood-soaked madness to me makes me think of the unnatural bloodlust that is common among bloody fingers. You see, my understanding of the bloody fingers is that these are people with a propensity for violence, but it is their service to the Formless Mother and Mohg that sends them over the edge, turning them into an irredeemable fiend.
I am Yura, as you might recall. Hunter of bloody fingers, tarnished, held in thrall by cessblood. Zealots, who stalk their own, if you stay the path. You are certain to face more of them. Just remember, no kinship with their ilk remains. Their madness precludes it. Don't let your emotions stay your blade.
Thus, it is my opinion that the Formless Mother is exacerbating an existing conflict to further expand her influence through bloodshed. Think about it, the Formless Mother's influence spreads via blood, so let's speculate the war in the Land of Reeds started as a genuine dynastic or political conflict, but as blood began to be spilled, the Formless Mother infected the minds of the warriors, and it's now become a fight for the sake of a fight, a blood-soaked madness, a slaughter, with no real end goal in sight. The Land of Reeds is the perfect land for a being that feeds off blood, as even the weapons from this land, the katana and its variants, are designed to cause as much bleeding as possible. It's almost inevitable that the Formless Mother would be drawn to a conflict in this region. Beyond this, I also find it telling that we have two characters connected to the Formless Mother that come from this land. We've already discussed Okina, who was clearly formed into the killer he is by the conflict of the Land of Reeds. Was it perhaps the Formless Mother's influence that drove him to come to the lands between and meet up with Mohg to become an instrument of her will? Perhaps. Then of course we have Yura, who is from the Land of Reeds as well, something we can tell aesthetically, but is also alluded to by the description of his hat, which names the Land of Reeds as the origin of this replica. The fact that Yura wears a Ronin's outfit is also very telling to me, not only because it ties him to the samurai culture of the Land of Reeds, but also what it suggests about the current politics of the Lands of Reeds. Ronin are samurai who serve no master, Did Yura have to give up his house in order to hunt down the Bloody Fingers and seek out the root of this corruption? Did he see the corruption all around him, including in the great dynastic houses of the Land of Reeds? How lost is the Land of Reeds to this bloody conflict, and how much of it is caused by a cosmic entity? And now this brings me to the samurai starting class, and finally how this all could potentially relate to the Blood Star. We've established that the samurai starting class is a warrior from the Land of Reeds that was part of the civil conflict, but is also a tarnished. They start with a katana, the Land of Reed armour, and most importantly, the red thorn round shield. The only artistic depiction of red thorns in the entire game. And interestingly, the item description for this shield says it's an ancient red thorn design, meaning this red thorn has been part of the Land of Reed's culture for a long time. This is one of the items that has often led me to wonder whether the Formless Mother and the Blood Star are the same being. I've already shown some circumstantial evidence for why I think the Formless Mother may be attached to the conflict in the Land of Reeds, and now here we get an artistic depiction of the Briars of Sin on the shield of a samurai who serves a great house. Is this the symbol of one of the great houses? Does this mean that the Blood Star actually has influence in these lands as well? And does it mean it's only one entity that's feeding on the conflict here in the Land of Reeds? Or does it just so happen that both of these cosmic entities are attracted to blood, and thus they have influence in the same land? Well, let's answer that question. Let's finally answer, are the Formless Mother and the Blood Star one and the same? With everything I've looked at while researching this video, my answer to that question is no, I do not believe they are the same thing. They just overlap slightly because they are both concerned with blood. But in my opinion, if you look at everything we have learned about both entities, what they stand for, their symbolism, how you interact with them, and how they interact with the world around them, there just isn't actually that many connections apart from the fact they use blood as a medium. And I'm hoping that future Jeff will have at this point put up an interesting infographic that compares the two entities. Firstly, before I go any further, I wanted to make sure I wasn't making a fool of myself by making this argument, and then in fact in the Japanese it's outright stated that these are one and the same, or the same language is used to describe both of them. So I ran it past Lokey, who did indeed confirm that they are referred to in different ways in the Japanese text as well, so shout out to Lokey for confirming that. So moving on to the in-game analysis, one of my main issues is the way in which they behave and what we kind of know about them and what they are as entities. As I've already discussed, the Blood Star, while unique, does seem to behave like a star. Whether or not it is a star is up for debate, but it behaves like one. Whereas the Formless Mother does not. In fact, the Formless Mother is named as an outer god, the Blood Star never is. Outer gods and stars are very distinct things in the lore of Elden Ring, and as such, it isn't surprising that the Formless Mother behaves in a very different way from the Blood Star. This is not to say an outer god could not be a star. What little we seem to know about the outer gods is that they can very much take different forms. For example, we learn from the Scorpion Stinger that the outer god of Rot, now sealed in the Lake of Rot, had a physical form or avatar that took the form of a scorpion. On the other hand, the description of the twin bird Kite Shield describes the outer god of the Deathbirds, who has a twin bird as its envoy. Then of course we have the outer god of the Frenzied Flame, which is even more inscrutable, but it operates in this terrestrial plane through the three fingers. Whether the three fingers are the avatar of the Frenzied Flame outer god, mimicking the relationship of the Greater Will and its two fingers, or if it's an avatar form of the Chaos outer god itself, is open to interpretation. The point being is that there are really no constraints as far as we are aware of the form that an outer god could take, and as we discussed earlier, the Blood Star does have a sort of godlike relationship with its adherents, so technically there's nothing to say that the Blood Star couldn't be the form that an outer god took. It's just there's a problem with this, as the Formless Mother is formless. It doesn't seem to coalesce as a star. Indeed, Mohg is able to pierce its body wherever he is, suggesting the Formless Mother doesn't have a body or form like a traditional being, rather it just exists along the fabric of reality everywhere. This is the way in which it is communed with by Mohg, her chosen lord. He can literally reach into her body wherever he is. However, again, this is not the same for the Blood Star. The Blood Star is spatially disconnected. It can't be physically communed with in this plane. One has to see it in the darkness, whilst also offering a blood sacrifice. Again, this is unlike with Mohg. When he wants to commune with the outer god, he is already connected to her via his corrupted blood. He is able to reach into her and in fact get her blood into the mortal plane. He does not need to offer a sacrifice of his own blood. And the summoning conditions for the powers of the Blood Star just aren't present in Mohgwyn Dynasty. No Red Glintstone is needed, no blood sacrifice is needed, and blindness is not needed. And aside from everything else, there seems to be just a different projection of what these entities stand for. The Blood Star, as I've mentioned, seems to be a malevolent, almost evil entity that craves pain and sacrifice on behalf of its user. Whereas the Formless Mother, yes, craves wounds and wants blood to be spread, but it embraces its followers and adherents in a way that simply isn't done by the Blood Star. Mohgwyn Dynasty is a dynasty of blood, one of love. It is reciprocal in a way, whereas the relationship with the Blood Star is brutal and demanding. You must offer a sacrifice, often of your own sight, in order to tap into its powers. I'm not saying the Formless Mother is benevolent either, but there's certainly a malevolence presence in the Blood Star that doesn't seem to be present in the Formless Mother. And aside from anything else, there are no thorns in the Mohgwyn Dynasty. So overall, taking everything together, I do not believe they are the same entity. I did also consider the fact that the Blood Star may be a corrupted star that's corrupted by the Formless Mother, but the aims and process of communion just seem so disconnected from one another that I cannot with any confidence say that these are the same entities. Any overlap is just because they are after the same medium of communion, blood. So thanks guys, that is my take on the Blood Star as it stands now. Will there be some additional lore in the DLC? We don't know, but after having thoroughly researched and thought about the Blood Star, I'm actually happy where the lore sits with it. It's clearly a mysterious entity that we're not really supposed to understand, and I'm fine with the part it plays in the lore. But what are your thoughts on the Blood Star? Do you disagree with my assessment that the Formless Mother and it are separate beings? Do you in fact think they are one and the same? And if so, why? Please let me know. But until next time guys, I will see you on the mountaintops of the giants. Take care and have a wonderful evening.